They underestimated you from the beginning. You didn't come with an army, nor did you have a massive following or visible weapons. You walked alone, spoke little, and carried yourself with the quiet strength that only the truly chosen possess. They mistook your silence for weakness, your humility for fear, and your solitude for vulnerability. But deep within, you were preparing for a war not of the flesh, but of the spirit. This wasn't just survival. This was spiritual warfare on a whole new level. And when the moment came, when the attacks became relentless, you didn't crumble, you rose. You rose like a force that had been forged through fire, betrayal, and pain. You didn't just survive what was sent to destroy you, you evolved into something they couldn't predict or contain. That's when the shift happened. The one-man army was no longer just a figure, he was a threat. Not because he sought power, but because he walked in alignment with a higher power. You weren't driven by revenge, but by divine purpose. Your steps were ordered, your protection unseen, and your resilience unshakable. They, the group that had operated in shadows, began to sense the shift. The very energy around you began to change. What once worked against others failed miserably when used on you. Their rituals, their schemes, their manipulations fell apart when aimed at your spirit. Because what they were dealing with wasn't just flesh and blood. You were backed by something higher. Your rise became the nightmare they never expected. You didn't retaliate the way they hoped you would. You didn't break, beg, or bow. You kept moving, kept building, kept standing, even when surrounded by darkness. That alone confused them. It was unnatural to them, someone who should have been buried long ago, still breathing, still speaking truth, still smiling. That smile burned more than fire. It showed them their efforts were powerless against divine protection. You didn't need a crowd to defend you. The heavens themselves stepped in. Things began to backfire for them. Misfortunes, exposures, internal chaos, it all returned to the senders, and every time they regrouped, they found themselves falling apart faster. That's what scared them the most. Not your retaliation, but your stillness, your ability to remain calm when chaos swirled. That calmness came from knowing who you are and who walks with you. That's something no coven, no gang, no weapon can counter. Your rise sent a signal to others, watching those who doubted you, those who judged you, even those who secretly hoped you'd fail. It reminded them that favor isn't always loud, but it's always effective. The one-man army didn't win by overpowering enemies, but by outlasting storms, outsmarting traps, and outshining darkness with pure inner light. You proved that real strength isn't found in numbers, but in truth, alignment, and purpose. You became a symbol of what happens when you allow the fire to shape you instead of consume you. And though they whispered, gathered, and conspired, they found themselves facing a force they couldn't manipulate or silence. They thought their numbers guaranteed success. They gathered in secret, performed their rituals in hidden places, fueled by envy, control, and deep spiritual insecurity. These witches didn't just operate in the physical, they tapped into realms meant to manipulate, distract, and destroy. They formed alliances with the singular intention of breaking the spirit of one person, you. They shared information, cast spells in agreement, and executed spiritual attacks with precision, believing that unity on their end would equal defeat on yours. But what they failed to understand is that even when many move against the chosen, they still fall short when the divine is involved. Their covens were strong in appearance, but corrupted at the core. Their plans, no matter how strategically crafted, couldn't override the anointing placed on your life. Every curse they sent your way turned into confusion in their own camp. Every lie they spoke unraveled before their own eyes. The group began to see that their power had limits. You didn't match their energy. You elevated above it. You weren't on their frequency, and that's exactly why their influence couldn't touch you. You were moving with unseen forces, protected by assignments from realms they couldn't access or interrupt. They depended on fear, manipulation, and intimidation. But you stood still, unwavering, radiating a kind of peace that exposed their own spiritual instability. That's when fear crept in, not because they lost control over you, but because they realized they never had it in the first place. They began turning on each other. Disloyalty and spiritual backlash began to dismantle their alliance. Their unity was shallow, rooted in darkness, and light began to expose cracks in every corner. They watched you thrive when you were supposed to fall. They observed your glow intensify after every attack. That didn't make sense to them. How could someone stand alone and yet grow stronger every time they tried to take them down? That's when it hit them. You weren't alone. You never were. You were fortified by divine presence, wrapped in spiritual armor, and reinforced by prayers you didn't even know were being spoken on your behalf. Their unity couldn't overpower your favor. What they did together in secrecy was overthrown by what you carried in silence. You didn't need a stage, an audience, or a defense team. You walked with authority because your purpose wasn't given to you by man. Their spells had no access to the blueprint written over your destiny. That's why every trap failed. That's why every plot collapsed. They underestimated the assignment you carried. They thought spiritual warfare would break you, not realizing it was training you. And as they watched you rise from every attack, their fear grew not because you fought like them, but because you never had to. Your very existence, untouched and still rising, became the loudest rebuke they ever received. The moment you chose to step fully into your divine identity, something shifted in the spiritual atmosphere. You were no longer just a target. They began to see you as a spiritual alarm. Your presence began exposing things that had been hidden for years. They could sense the change. They could feel the divine frequency you now operated on, and it terrified them. You didn't need to announce your power, because your energy disrupted their darkness on sight. They tried to observe you from a distance, hoping to find weakness, but all they saw was someone who had survived what should have destroyed them. That kind of survival sends a clear message. This person is not to be played with. The fear wasn't rooted in what you said, it was rooted in what you represented. You carried the proof that light will always prevail over manipulation, and that kind of power cannot be faked. You were no longer functioning in reaction to them. Now they were reacting to you. The energy they once used to attack was now being used to defend themselves. They scrambled in panic, because they realized you weren't afraid of them, their rituals, or their collective force. Fear shifted camps. They saw how your discernment sharpened. You no longer questioned if it was warfare, you recognized it immediately. You could feel the spiritual shifts, smell the manipulation behind fake smiles, and sense the intentions behind words. And that scared them more than anything. You saw them before they revealed themselves. You prayed before they launched attacks. You fasted before they even planned the next move. And that kind of spiritual preparation disarmed their every tactic. They were dealing with someone chosen, someone covered, someone dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. Your silence made them uncomfortable. Your strength in stillness left them confused. You didn't match the chaos with chaos, you disarmed it with peace. That's what unnerved them. They wanted a reaction. They wanted to see you angry, fearful, or bitter. But instead, you moved with grace, calm, and strategy. Every move you made looked effortless, but it was backed by divine instruction. And every win you achieved made their skin crawl, because it was a reminder that their energy was no match for your anointing. The fear they now carry is spiritual. It's the realization that no amount of darkness can ever cancel the light within. Someone who is walking in alignment with their purpose. They're scared because you become unshakable. The same things they used on others no longer work on you. Their spells return to sender. Their curses turn into blessings in your life. Their confusion becomes clarity in your path. And no, it's not a coincidence. They know they're dealing with someone different. Someone born to break generational patterns. Someone designed to dismantle demonic systems. Someone who walks as evidence that no weapon formed will prosper. They watch from the shadows now, no longer confident in their power, but trembling at yours. They try to hide it, but spiritually, the fear is undeniable. You didn't just survive their warfare, you rose from it glowing. You walked out with more power, more favor, more clarity, and a spiritual authority that they can't replicate or resist. To every listener, if you've ever felt outnumbered, misunderstood, or attacked, remember this story. Remember that when the hand of God is on your life, no gang, no group, no darkness can stand against you. Keep walking in your light. Keep trusting the process. You were never meant to blend in. You were chosen to break through. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for standing strong in your journey as a chosen one. If this message spoke to your spirit, share it with someone who needs the reminder. Stay powerful, stay protected, and never forget who you are. Until next time, peace, strength, and divine favor be with you always.